Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, May 16, 2026, time in Texas, about 9 a.m. And thanks for like, subscribe, and share. So some of the things we'll cover. ISIS planned a mass killing at a U.S. base in Michigan. We have a concrete example of U.S. military retaliation. President Trump did not eat Chinese food. And Russia plans a hit on NATO and Europe. And it appears that the U.S. military's second wave Operation Sledgehammer could be imminent. So let's get started. We're going to begin with space weather. Yesterday we had a G2. Today it's a G1 from the solar wind hitting the Earth at 1.5 million miles per hour. And we'll have a new moon tonight, dark skies, that could aid the U.S. military if they choose to strike Iran tonight. We could see auroras in the polar areas. And we continue to hear more information about the Super El Nino in the Pacific Ocean. Now, Space Weather YouTube site has an interesting paper about the effects of the ongoing pole shift on Earth. As I've put out many times, we do have a decreasing energy in our electromagnetic shield, and it is via the magnetic lines of energy on Earth that many animals and insects navigate. And because it's decreasing, it's causing problems with animals and insects. A new paper gives an example of the bogong moths losing "Where am I?" So that's going on. And of course, we have effects too on human health. Now, we've also had in the past 24 hours 2 large earthquakes, and it's believed, based on what Earth is receiving in terms of pressure and effects from space, that we could expect to see more large earthquakes. So we had a 6.7 in Japan yesterday and also a 6.2 in Indonesia. The one in Japan yesterday struck offshore but was felt in many of the Japanese islands. It was north of Tokyo and about 50 kilometers east of Nato City. It was felt, and the earthquake, 6.7, offshore, was about 31 miles deep, but the impact on the Japanese islands was enough to stop trains and take their power off-grid, according to the report by Mary Greeley. And so we have earthquakes coming. And we have this, so we have the FBI and the U.S. military foiled a major ISIS plot for a mass killing, mass casualty event on a U.S. Army base located in Michigan. And this was foiled by undercover agents working with a Somali American who is affiliated with ISIS, who then provided drone maps of the base near Detroit, and also trained the undercover agents and how to use armor-piercing ammo, how to make Molotov cocktails, and so on, and gave them specific information of where to hit on the base with hitting specific buildings to increase a mass kill event. So that's going on. And Mohammed Saeed, the 19-year-old, had formerly been a member of the Michigan National Guard. He went through basic training but failed in his completion of that program. So he had been on the base. And we had the U.S. military retaliation taking place last night against ISIS. About a year ago, we had 2 U.S. soldiers and a translator killed in Syria. And this is good to know. The U.S. military will not quit until they have brought about retaliation anytime U.S. military soldiers are killed. So last night, President Trump authorized a hit by the U.S. military on an ISIS base in Nigeria. And the U.S. military confirmed they had taken out the leader plus about 50 ISIS fighters. And toward that end, recently in August, about a month ago, we had a training operation going on in Africa, in Morocco, where 2 U.S. military soldiers disappeared. The U.S. military continued to search and found the remains of the male soldier in the ocean near Morocco, and recovered the body of the female soldier in an ocean cave in that same area. Oh, you didn't know that the U.S. military can track by DNA? Yes, so that's going on. So those soldiers' bodies were recovered. If foul play was involved, the U.S. military will retaliate in the future. And more on that Michigan ISIS operation, that the Somali American, 19 years old, Amar Mohammed Saeed, yes, had been well trained, it appears, by ISIS. It was an ISIS undercover sleeper cell individual. So that's been thwarted by both the FBI and the U.S. military. He has been arrested. He was arrested May 13. So that's going on. We have this information coming out from Israeli Professor Bernstein, as shown on Fox News recently, that China is now attempting to get its oil from Iran using alternative routes, mostly across Pakistan. We have this from Ward Carroll. The Navy has decided that aviators cannot command amphibious ships for the U.S. military. Instead, they're going to use surface commanders. We have also, regarding the El Nino and the Pacific Ocean from Mike from around the world, that the impact on our upcoming hurricane season could be devastating. We not only have rising ocean temperatures in the Pacific, but we have much less polar melting, mitigating the impact of this ocean water temperature rise. The Pacific Ocean is now at a temperature 4 times higher than has been previously seen in history. And the effect on the next coming hurricane season, with the Pacific Ocean warming, less polar melting, could be enough to cripple ocean shipping. So that's going on. And we have this from 2CTV, that in the UK, we know the Labour Party lost 1,400 seats in a recent election, which means that Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister, really is not in command. It's not backed by their system. He's being asked to resign. So that's going on. And we have this from Lay's Real Talk about China, that we have President Trump and President Xi's meeting this week, talking about what really went on. And Lay's Real Talk brings out this new information that President Trump and President Xi had a 1.5 hour private meeting. And the only individuals present in the meeting were President Trump, President Xi, and Xi's daughter, who received her undergraduate and master's from Harvard, who acted as the translator. And it's believed they discussed some things revolving around Xi's hold on power and Xi's health. So that's going on. And we have this from Enforcer. So we have that Russia yesterday was sending planes around the Middle East to evac Russian citizens from both the UAE and also in Africa, specifically Somalia, where it's speculated that with this next U.S. military operation against Iran, we could see the Somali pirates and the Houthis in Yemen trying to block the Red Sea. So Russia evac'd Russian citizens from several areas inside Iran, and also from Middle Eastern nations, including UAE, and also from Somalia. And it also we have going on between Israel and Iran's proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon, that President Trump brought about an extension of the ceasefire for another 45 days. And we have the UAE building an alternate shipping route using a pipeline to its port near Oman, trying to decrease their need for the Strait of Hormuz. It's believed the U.S. military second Operation Sledgehammer is imminent, as when President Trump returned from his trip to China yesterday, he rejected what the Iran says are their beginning peace requirements, which included the U.S. military, the U.S. surrendering to Iran, the U.S. paying reparations to Iran, the U.S. Releasing frozen money and bank accounts for Iran, and for the U.S. to acknowledge that Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz and other unacceptable points. And it was publicly stated during President Trump's trip to China that both the U.S. and China believe that Iran cannot have a nuke and that Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. We have this coming out from Enforcer regarding Russia and Ukraine. Last night, Ukraine hit an oil plant and chemical plant inside Russia, and that Russia, it's being reported, accidentally hit inside Russia. It's a Russian apartment building with its own S-400, an air defense weapon, and that drones were seen near Moscow, launched by Ukraine into Russia, and that Ukraine also hit last night a Russian corvette, a ship, and disabled it. We have this coming from Ukraine intel that Russia preps to hit Kiev, and it's believed this is coming from several points. One, that the Russian people and certain segments of the Russian military want President Putin to juice up the Russian military attacks on Ukraine and wrap it up. And it's being put forth that Belarus also may enter with Russia to hit Ukraine from the north. So that's going on. We have this intel from Best and Taylor that the Russian government yesterday approved President Putin hitting European nations, including Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And we have, within the past 48 hours, seen in Latvia both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense resigning because certain groups inside Latvia did not approve of the way that Latvia did not strike Russia when Russian drones came into Latvia. That happened this week. We have this from Canadian Prepper. Russia preps to hit NATO and Europe, and that Russia plans to use hypersonic missiles, including the Sarmat-2 and Oreshniks, on the command and control centers in Kiev. That would be the government buildings. And also in Kamchatka. Now, Kamchatka is located, so we have Alaska and then Kamchatka on the eastern side of Russia. So it's being put forth that in Kamchatka, Russia is putting drone nets on its nuclear subs. It's believed that Russia believes NATO may hit Kamchatka, and that Ukraine believes Russia will hit Kiev. I expect to see massive hits by Russia on Ukraine. I expect to see Russia also taking areas I had previously predicted they would take, including Transnistria in Moldova, and also the Suwalki Gap that borders Poland and Lithuania. I believe we could see that happen this week or so, and I predicted that Russia would make these moves when the U.S. withdrew from NATO. And what we're seeing right now is the U.S. In the process of withdrawing from NATO. So that's going on. And we have this. Russia yesterday put forth a bill in their government okaying Russia annexing Transnistria, which is a part of the Moldova, not a NATO nation, that borders Ukraine. So that's going on. And President Putin will travel to China to meet with President Xi in 5 days. We have this coming out. Now, President Trump has said, and the American people are strongly opposed to the U.S. membership in NATO, the UN, any globalist organization. But we recently saw with our own lying eyes that NATO and Europe did not support America in their first hit on Iran. And the U.S. is trying to prevent Iran from having nukes to protect both America and the world. But we saw NATO and Europe turning against the U.S. by not allowing the U.S. to use its own military bases in Europe to hit Iran. Well, what you put out goes around. And now President Trump is immediately withdrawing 5,000 troops from Germany. And in the past 48 hours, stopped a normal deployment to Poland of 4,200 U.S. military soldiers who were actively in the process of deployment. This has blindsided Poland. It appears Poland planned to use the U.S. military to fight Russia on its eastern border. So, no, the U.S., the American people do not support NATO, nor will they send the U.S. military to protect Europe against Russia, because NATO and Europe failed to step up to the home plate to support the U.S. in our recent hit on Iran. So that's going on. We have this from Pete Garose. Now, what's going on with Cuba? So we have more details about the CIA Director John Ratcliffe going to Cuba, I believe that was Thursday, to take an arrest warrant for Raul Castro, the brother of Fidel Castro. Now, Raul Castro is 94 years old, and it appears 30 years ago, there were Cuban Americans, 3 brothers, who were flying 3 planes to Cuba to bring in humanitarian aid. The CIA has on video and audio a recording of Raul Castro, who was then Minister of Defense, giving the order for the Cuban military to shoot down those planes. And that's the basis of the arrest warrant. It is speculated that CIA Director John Ratcliffe talked with Raul Castro. You have several choices here. We can arrest you and put you on trial. We have the evidence against you. Or Cuba can capitulate to the U.S. It appears that Cuba may be in the process of capitulating. We have this regarding China, that when President Trump returned from his China trip yesterday, he put a hold on the billions of dollars of weapons order to Taiwan. And we have this from China Observer. While President Trump was in China, he did not drink or eat anything offered to him by China. Instead, even at meetings or dinners, the Secret Service provided, including the plates and silverware and glasses. The Secret Service also provided everything that President Trump drank or ate. He did not eat the Chinese food. And when the U.S. was preparing to return to the U.S., all of the gifts given to President Trump, his group, the CEOs, the press, and so on, that everything given to the U.S. by China was collected and burned. And before the U.S. went to China, they told everyone to leave all of their electronic devices at home, their laptops, cell phones, and so on. When the group arrived in China, they were issued U.S. government burner phones and laptops. And they were then, when the U.S. was leaving, they collected all the Chinese gifts, plus they collected all of the U.S. burner phones and laptops and burned them. And I learned something new, that even a charging station can be used to obtain data and also put malware on electronic devices. And we have this. There were 3 dust-ups between the U.S. Secret Service, the U.S. press, and the CCP police. They all happened May 14, which would have been Thursday. And Thursday is when President Trump had the private meeting with Xi and Xi's daughter. So on Thursday, we had in the morning, just before the bilateral meeting, Chinese reporters storming the hotel to the extent that they knocked down Secret Service agents. We had then a dust-up at the Temple of Heaven, where there was a fist fight between the Secret Service and CCP police. The CCP police tried to disarm Secret Service, but the Secret Service won the fist fight, and then they went in with their guns inside the Temple of Heaven to accompany President Trump to protect him. The fistfight between Secret Service and CCP police held up President Trump and President Xi going into the Temple of Heaven for about 30 minutes. And then we had the CCP police also trying to separate the U.S. press at the Temple of Heaven. The U.S. press then stormed the CCP police and managed to then reconnect with President Trump and the motorcade to get their ride back to the hotel. So we see China, the CCP police, the Chinese press, and so on, acting like monsters, buffoons, or certainly not in being professional in interacting with both Secret Service and the U.S. media. So this concludes my update. Look for look for the U.S., I believe, this week to begin a second, and we understand it will be many times more massive, the second wave under Operation Sledgehammer for the U.S. military to hit Iran. And we're hearing that Iran is out of money and they can't pay the mercenaries they brought in from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and that they're running out of food and cannot even feed the mercenaries. And that Iran is now trying to arm certain segments of Iranian people, primarily those directly associated with the IRGC. Look for this week also Russia to increase massive hits on Ukraine. Look for Russia to also make hits, it's believed, against Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And for Russia to annex Transnistria, a part of Moldova. Now, we could also see Belarus mounting an attack on Ukraine from the north. So it's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, world peace, and world health. I love you, and I'll see you soon.